a couple of days ago, right? Did the teachers also receive that poll, or was it just the students?
They told us in a general way about the results of the poll yesterday. Although actually, I think he said, I think that the poll like closed last night or something. And so they didn't get the final results yet.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like, people answer that however they wanted to, but for the most part, I think a lot of people are kind of itching to get back on campus, no matter what. And so whether, I think it depends, at least in, I'm sure as you guys in the college knows that Pennsylvania had like 96 new cases yesterday and it's starting to come back. So cases are definitely, I think, going to start spiking again in the winter. And I think it's all depends on how well we deal with the new cases will determine what happens next semester. So I feel like, one course of option is to let people come back to campus and then wait and see what happens in the spring, like if people are back on campus but you allow off-campus housing again, you have a bigger dispersal of people, and then you can either do online, um, all like completely online, but the students are still on campus. There's still like the food options on campus and everything, or you can do some sort of hybrid, or you can do whatever you want. But I just feel like a lot of students are really itching to get back no matter what. So it's going to be a tough decision, I think.
Other opinions?
I feel like my opinion doesn't count so much because I'm an older student who doesn't really like I've never lived on campus, so I can't speak for like campus life and that kind of thing. But it doesn't seem smart to bring a bunch of young students to a town where there's a lot of older folks that have a lot of issues, health issues, and are at higher risk. I guess if anyone comes back to campus, I liked what you were saying about kind of only part of like some seniors and freshmen, or some kind of mix of that, or just kind of some slow incremental kind of thing. But I don't know. I kind of think we need to be safe on this and put our feelings a little more on the side of I want to go hang out with so and so, because I feel like of course people are itching to get back on campus. I guess like I don't completely understand that, but I can partially understand that. But I feel like the risk is not worth the reward there.
Other people, you guys must all have an opinion of some sort, so feel free to express it.
I can't hear you.
Your audio is super quiet.
Oh, sorry. Here, let me put my little. I always felt like a telemarketer when I do this, but I'll do it so you can hear me.
Okay, is that better or not? Yeah, okay. So what else? Isabel, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say I would love to be back on campus, but also I don't want to get sent home after 2 weeks if it all totally fails. Like that just would be even worse in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Jackie, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm really hoping, maybe naively, to be back on campus. And I know, like, starting last night, there's been a lot of rumors just among, like, my friends of what they're hearing from professors and everything. And it seems like everyone's pretty frustrated, at least among the people I'm hearing from, that other schools have been back and doing this. And Dickinson's smaller than some of these big state schools that have tried. But then again, Dickinson chose the safe option, so I don't know. I'm hoping to be back, and no matter what. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Danielle, what do you think?
I guess I agree with Ben. Like, I just think like it's kind of a risk, and I would prefer to like have the option to do virtual classes. Like some people, if they wanted to be back on campus, they would have that opportunity. Like last year, like I know there was an email sent out where you could like choose which one you wanted to do. So I think the option is really helpful. So
Yeah, and well, I want to hear your opinions before I say anything else. Odin, what do you think?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Like, yeah, it'd be cool to be on campus. Like sports wise as well. Like that's something I really enjoy. But it's also kind of like it's going to be. I don't know. I think no matter what happens, it's going to be such a hassle, and it's also going to be like just to be able to make it safe is what they should do. And it's kind of like if we're going to be online for much of it, I'd rather just be home. It's so much. It's probably easier, and I don't know. It's just kind of like it's gonna be. I don't predict it being a very convenient situation, no matter what. So, not quite sure.
Yeah, fair enough. Toby?
I agree with Isabel. I think obviously, like in an ideal world, I'd love to be back on campus. But if that means that we just kind of try and force it and have everyone back, and then in 3 weeks we have 60 cases and we're getting sent home, I think I'd only like to be back on campus if it's going to be able to be done in a smart and safe way, I guess, and not putting people in our community in danger and then people outside our community in danger as well.
Okay, fair enough. Diversity opinions, and I like to hear that. And this, quite honestly, I think this is part of the frustration. Like everyone wants this to be over. We're all tired of it. But I mean, pandemics are something that happen every 100 years, right? 100 years ago, you had the Spanish flu, and it actually killed a lot of people. It was probably worse than this, and we're learning. I just heard something today on a podcast. There's 70,000 scientific papers that have been published in the last 10 months investigating COVID. 70,000 papers. And I can tell you, because I've just got a couple papers accepted for publication here last week or so, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years once you submit a paper to get it back and fix it. So, I mean, that represents a huge amount. So, I mean, we are learning faster about this than probably almost anything that's ever affected the modern world. But as we learn more, we learn that there are more consequences. You probably heard there's a couple of vaccines that are ready for like the kind of like the final stages, right, of trials. But like those final trials, they basically give people injections and then expose them to the virus. And so those kinds of trials are really like you guys might volunteer. They probably pay you money to do it. I mean, people get paid to be involved in medical experiments. But and you guys are if you're young and healthy, then probably the risk is minimal. We're getting better drugs every day to actually treat things if you do get sick. But still, like it's a risk. But that's the only way you can test vaccines. And there's like 50 or 100 different vaccines that people are working on, and all those vaccines are going to have to be tested this way to figure out which ones work. So, yeah, I think that's why everyone's kind of frustrated. I mean, we all want this to go away. We all just want everyone back on campus and things to be normal. But, almost for sure, if you're back on campus, you'll have to wear a mask anytime you're in any kind of a building. There's going to be some sort of a form you're going to have to sign, and they're going to have pretty low tolerance. Not, like if I forget my mask when I go to class today, I'm going to get kicked out, right? But like people that refuse to wear a mask on a systematic basis, people that refuse to social distance systematically, all students will have to sign some form that says they realize if they do that, they'll be sent home. And as far as closing campus down, quite honestly, they're thinking more about like, we might not have a spring break because we might not want to send you away, because, you know, that's also a big risk, right? If everyone disperses for a week and goes and hangs out with a bunch of other people and then comes back, that's, you can imagine that's just sort of like going out and getting resupplied with, you know, even during flu season, it always happens, right? After spring break, we come back to campus and there's usually flu and stuff like that going around because people have dispersed and come back. And so they're talking about things like we might not have a spring break. They might do like over a 2 or 3 week period. We might have like some 2 or 3 3 or 4 day weekends. So we might have a couple long weekends right in a row as opposed to one spring break because they wouldn't want people to disperse and come back. So at campus is definitely going to be a fair bit different. But I do like one of the things I appreciate about all you guys sharing your ideas, you know, and you cover kind of the range of ideas that we talked about yesterday. You know, hopefully the ideal thing would be for us to have maximum flexibility. So for some people, working at home is not a very good option. And so, you know, we have a few people on campus right now, some are international students, some other students that just didn't feel like they'd be very successful trying to work at home because house is too busy. On the other end, you do have a lot of people who just don't want to be, for whatever reason, they're tired of being at home. Everyone's working from home, and they just want to be back on campus. Sports, there's all kinds of things. So, you know, maybe in the ideal world, we'd be able to give every student the option. And ideally what that might mean is that maybe only about half students want to be on campus, and then that keeps our numbers down so we can social distance. And that means that basically, you know, pretty much every class will have to be taught virtually and live. You know, it might be live streaming. So maybe I'd be in the classroom with the camera on me and be live streaming so that I can just basically record my lecture while I'm giving it, or record the class discussion or whatever. And then that could be posted to Zoom. So you guys could be, you know, at home, but you could be live, or you could watch a recording or whatever. I mean, obviously that makes a different dynamic, right? If you guys are all on Zoom, so I can ask you a question, put you in breakout rooms and you guys can talk. If half the class is live and half, you know, in the classroom and half the class is virtual, you know, stuff like that become more complicated to try to still have some sort of dynamic that's reasonable. And like the camera would have to be on the screen, so you guys probably wouldn't see the class. So you might be hearing these ghost voices of people in the background asking questions, but you guys would still presumably, you know, see I don't know. We just have to survive. We just have to get through another semester. And I hope for most of you, you know, it's difficult for the college financially to you know, because the college has a financial structure that depends in part on finances from people living on campus, people buying meal plans, people paying tuition, etc. And so when no one's on campus, that affects the budget, and so that affects things like, you know, personnel. We have people furloughed. We have you know, that basically are at home. They still get their benefits. We're you know, their colleges giving everyone health care still, because it'd be crazy to cut people's health care right now when they need it. But there are people that they're sitting home not getting paid, employees of the college, because we don't need people to clean dorms. We don't need many people in food service. We don't need some other services. And the longer we stay in this mode, the more of a financial hit the college takes. So, and that just, you know, on one hand, who cares about money, right? Health is much more important ultimately than finances. But on the other hand, you know, all those things are in play. But I appreciate you guys all being concerned about health. You should be concerned about your health, and part of being in our community is being concerned about the health of others, right? Because, you know, even me, like I'm older than you guys, but I'm not, you know, super into the realm where it might be hazardous for me. But, you know, I certainly, like, I haven't gone to see my parents because they're in their 80s and they haven't gotten sick, and I haven't gotten sick. Might be okay for me to go see them, you know, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to risk, you know, I don't want to threaten their health. And we certainly don't want to threaten the health. As Ben said, Carlisle does have a fairly somewhat older community. So we have to figure out a balance. And I hope you guys trust that in the end, the college, I think, will try to make the decision that best meets those needs. But you also want to express your opinions. If you have strong opinions, you know, I know there's a survey, that's great, but email Vice President Stroud. Like, his email is like stroudg@Dickinson, and you guys should send emails if you have strong opinions, or if you have sort of a brainstorm you think is a great idea. Because quite honestly, I've not heard yet the best idea, I think. There's so many out there that none of them really seem to be the best, you know, way above everything else. So if you have a great idea, please, you know, send it to me and I'll forward it as well. But I think to some degree we're still looking. But in the end, life will go on, semester will go on, and you know, I can imagine for you guys, you know, the bottom line is we're going to come out of this. You know, this time next year, probably there'll be some kind of a vaccine, and what we can look forward to is, I think, as that happens, a lot of businesses have been hurt by this, but there's a lot of economic potential here. So I think, you know, once we get a vaccine and people start to feel we can be more normal again, there probably is going to be a surge back, hopefully, in the economy, and it'll be great, especially for people looking to graduate soon. Hopefully you'll be graduating about the time the economy starts picking up again, and hopefully we'll have some good outlook for a little while now to kind of make up all the ground that we've lost. Okay. Righto. So what we're going to do, I'm going to quickly zip through a little bit of taxonomy stuff to finish it up. I've got a taxonomy exercise I've posted that we'll be due next week. It's not part of lab. It's just an assignment, because I do think it's useful for you guys to practice this a little bit more. So you'll see I've got 4 soil series from across the US, and you're going to practice understanding the taxonomy, and then also matching up profile descriptions with soil series based on just knowing the taxonomy of the soil series. And so hopefully, to me, it feels like a kind of a practical exercise, and that'll finish that part up and wrap up that kind of detailed thing. We're going to move into more topical things in the next couple of weeks, looking at soil erosion and some things that are a little bit more topical now and less sort of nitty-gritty stuff. Okay, so for lab today, we'll meet at 1:30. I'll talk to you quickly about a couple of things, and then mostly what I want to do in lab today, again, project time, I want to meet with each one of you individually for 5 or 10 minutes, and I want you to talk me through where you are in your project, so that I've got some ideas on how that's going for people. All right. Okay, so let's get to where we need to be here. Okay, so like we talked about, you guys have done, you've actually made some soils maps already, and so that's sort of the topic for this week, was finishing taxonomy and looking at soil maps. So in taxonomy, ultimately we have this series of categories that we use to develop a taxonomic name for a soil series. And so we're just going to run through these quickly, and I'm going to point out this presentation, once it goes up, is actually might be a useful reference, because I've got several slides on here you'll see that are tables that are sort of shortcuts for interpreting some of the details of soil taxonomy. Ultimately, there are PDFs online. There are PDFs that have links to in the Moodle page for the actual official soil taxonomy. So USDA puts out an official guide that is several hundred pages. You can download it for free, and it takes you through things step by step for every soil series. So you could basically do the taxonomy of any one of those 25,000 soil series in the US. And you can apply it to soils in other parts of the world as well. Although we should be respectful that some countries have their own soil system. And if you work in those countries, you should probably use their system. So the highest order thing is, highest order category is the soil order, right? And as we've talked a lot about, you can generally get to the soil order by looking at presence or absence of major diagnostic horizons. A few things have mineralogical properties. A few things, it's more about extremes of climate conditions, temperature and moisture, right? So iridosols and gelisols in particular, those are really determined by climate. The andisols, the vertisols are really dependent by parent material. Histosols are dependent on lots of organic material. And then as you go from entosols to septosols to alpha sols and spotosols to ultisols and oxasols. That's all kind of about degree of soil development over time. Until you get to, oxasols and ultisols are kind of the extreme of development of soils. So soil suborders then tend to be based on things like moisture regime and diagnostic horizons. And so we've got a general map for the United States that shows the major different soil moisture regimes. And this is really generalized. You could use this if you don't have more detailed information. Although certainly like the aquic regime, where soils have a lot of moisture in them, if you have a pond and you're out in the middle of, let's see, that's Tennessee. Yeah, I think if you're in Tennessee, even though this is showing that most of Tennessee is in the Utic soil regime, in a wetland, in a local marsh, you might be in an aquic regime. But this is a starting point for looking at soil moisture regimes in the United States. They have maps like this for the world as well. And you can see the world map for the US, for example, is not as detailed because we're looking at a much smaller scale. But the terms are similar as well. You can apply these moisture terms to any part of the globe. So that's one part of the suborder. This is just a table. And again, a lot of this stuff I put in here just to sort of condense this into one PowerPoint so you can find this information pretty easily. But this just explains what most of these terms mean. So I'm not going to sit here and read them, but if you were trying to figure out a particular soil moisture regime, you can come to this PowerPoint and the terms are all pretty clearly defined here. So hopefully that's a useful resource. The other thing with soil suborders, they're also can contain information about diagnostic horizons, right? So we've talked a little bit about this. Not every horizon is diagnostic. So here's another table, and this shows the soil orders, and it shows this isn't 100%, but it shows some of the commonly observed diagnostic horizons and/or properties, and sort of a representative horizon sequence. So for example, if we think of a diagnostic horizon, again, if you think about a diagnostic property for anything that you're using to identify materials, like we talked about minerals, color is not a diagnostic property, but sometimes luster can be, right? So in a similar sense, the A horizon is not generally a diagnostic horizon because it's in most of the soil orders. On the other hand, E horizons aren't always present. So an E horizon is more of a diagnostic horizon. And O horizons, especially if you've got multiple sub horizons, that's pretty diagnostic of a histic materials or a histosol. So when we talk about diagnostic horizons, something can be a diagnostic horizon for one soil order. And even if that horizon's in another soil order, in the second soil order, it might not be diagnostic. So just try to remember that. But this is a nice sort of shortcut table that gives you some ideas of some of the common horizons that can be diagnostic horizons for the different soil series. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, so just as a reference, I put that up so you can, when you're doing some activities in the future, you might want to look at that. So now we go, as we start to get more detailed, we go into the grade group, and this is generally defined as something about the degree of the diagnostic horizon expression within the taxonomies of each particular soil order. So there are tables. This gets, as we go down to each level, there are more things in that level, so it gets more complicated. So you can't really have a comprehensive table that explains all of this, but this gives some ideas about the formative elements. So these formative elements are the things that are going to show up in that last part of the soil taxonomy. It's a haplodelph. The hap comes from being a minimum horizonation, right? So that formative element is down here. So this is this isn't complete, but this shows a lot of the formative elements and explains, where they come from if you're interested in that, but also tells what they mean. So again, there's no reason to talk through each one of these things, but this is sort of a useful table when you're doing soil taxonomy to be able to look something up quickly and see what it means. So then from the grade groups, they're divided into subgroups, and most of the subgroups are something about whether a particular soil series or a particular subgroup, whether the soil in that subgroup is unique, like it's a subgroup that doesn't occur in any other soil orders, or whether it's a subgroup that actually is a ultisol, but there's kind of a similar subgroup in the alpha sols. And so that would be something that would be called an intergrade. An intergrade soil, or sometimes you have there are certainly some subgroups within a soil taxonomy that are very unique. They don't have properties that are similar to any other subgroup. And so the terms we use for that are, and this is important because you'll see these words again, all of these things that we're talking about that I'm going through here are things you'll see in different soil taxonomies. So the main subgroup things are, the first thing is something that's called the central concept, which means it's kind of the, it's very typical of a particular grade group. So the grade group has subgroups, but there may be one subgroup that is the most representative of that grade group. And actually, you'll see that as the adjective typic. So the word typic here is something that you'll see when you are, let me see what I can do here. Yeah, typic right there. It means that it's the central concept or the most common subgroup of that grade group. Then when you have an intergrade is when, as I mentioned, that the soil it has got some properties that are similar with another grade group. And so intergrade groups, for example, they talk about you could have a verdic torrefluvens, which means it's got some properties of vertisols, but it is a torrefluvent, so it's an entisol. So fundamentally, the soil is an entisol, but there are some properties. Maybe it's got some swelling clays in it, for example. And so this is a way to show that there are some properties of another soil order that actually is similar. So those are intergrade groups, and then the last are extragrade groups. Extragrade groups don't necessarily have properties of another order, but they have properties that are important, that are kind of unique, that are important, that may affect their use in management. So, for example, you might have an, well, here's sort of 3 examples. So if you have a typic haploorthod, that means this particular soil is typical of that grade group. If you have an andic haploorthod, that means that it's a spotosol. That's the OD. It's a spotosol, but it's got some properties similar to andisols. If you have a lithic haploordoth, right? So they all have the same grade group and suborder and order names here, but a lithic haploordoth would be a haploordoth that's got rock fragments in it, and that may be important, for example, for agriculture. If you've got that soil and you're a farmer, that may mean that you have to do different management when you go out and till, because if there are a bunch of rocks, big rocks in your field, and you try to till the soil, you may mess up your equipment if you're hitting those big rocks. So something could be important for management. Okay. And then here's a table that shows some of the formative elements for grade groups. And this actually is a pretty long table. So it's actually three different slides here. But again, I put these on here because I figured you guys could use this as a reference now when we're done. But for example, we can find, if we look up lithic, lithic means stone. So it means if that's part of your subgroup name as an extra grade, it means shallow to hard bedrock, etc. So you can look all these terms up. Yeah. And so then that gets us down to family, which is sort of the most detailed part of the soil series. And there's a lot of different things that can go into families, and there's sort of fewer rules for this. A lot of times there's some particle size term. Sometimes if there's one mineral that's really important, there's a term for the mineral. Or if it says mixed, for example, that means that there can be lots of different types of minerals in the different soil texture groups. But soil temperature is usually part of the family. And so that's something we'll talk about. Sometimes there can be things like the cation exchange capacity, and also more specific things like, are there reactions, how deep is it, etc. So the soil things, the mineralogy and some of those special properties, there's not one table for that because those can be pretty unique. But for things like temperature, which is usually part of a family, these are the temperature terms that usually you'll see in the soil series name. And so this table is just a reference for that, but it shows you MAST is the mean annual soil temperature. And so that's one of the most common ways to divide up these different soil or temperature regimes, right? So here's a table that tells you how they're defined. And then there also is, there are a number of maps. Again, this would be a generalized map. There may be sort of microclimates in specific areas that might mean that you would not necessarily use these terms. But this is a good starting point. If you don't have any other information, you can see the names are down here. And just like we have this for the US, we also have this for the world. So here's a world soil odor map. The names are the same in part because this is made from the USDA. So this isn't the FAO classification for soil temperature regimes, but this is consistent with what we use in the US. And so, so in the end, this is what you end up with. And these last two slides simply give you some examples of soils that are different subgroups, for example. So the central concept, how do you know that this particular soil is a central concept soil? What word tells you that? So here's the name, starts with fine loamy. If you're unsure, look at their, oh, sorry, who said that? Yeah.
Is it typic?
Yes, typic. So typic means it's a central concept of that particular grade group. So you see typic there, you see typic there, you see typic there, typic there, typic there. So all of these are different soils. All of these are actually different soil orders, but typic is in all of these because these are central concept suborders. Okay. What word in this first one, what word do you think refers to soil texture?
The first one where it's saying fine loamy or fine or clayey, each one. Yep.
So that's pretty straightforward. The mixed has to do with the mineralogy. So yeah, and so it breaks down the names over here, right? So that's mixed mineralogy. This is mixed mineralogy. This one, the clay oxic isohyperthermic typic rhododalt. These are great names. Tongue twisters. That one in particular, the oxic means that it's got the mineralogy actually is sort of unique. So it's got oxide clays and oxide minerals like goethite and hematite. What about the where is the temperature regimes in these? Where's the word that tells us about the temperature regime?
It's right before the typic.
Yeah, so mesic, or isomesic, or isohyperthermic, or subgelic. So the temperature term it's usually the term right in front of the capitalized words. And what about what soil? What words here refer to? So we have order, suborder, and great group. What word or what set of letters applies to the great group? And it tells us about soil moisture. As you're looking for stuff, if you read the generalized descriptions, like they kind of explain everything in there.
Is it the first few words? Is it the first 3 letters and the last word?
Yep. So the UDI, that means you're in a eudic or a humid soil moisture regime. For this next soil, the PLA means that we're in a high eudic plaque isotypic placa aquept. Yeah, so in this one, this is actually a little bit different. The aquic, which is the soil moisture regime, is in the middle, which actually that's kind of weird, because usually, yeah. So here the soil moisture regime is the second thing. The same is true with this clay oxic isothermic typic rhododult. But then the fine silty mixed mesic typic fragiaqualf. Now we've got the soil moisture regime is in the middle there too, yeah. And this has got a fragipan. But that last word is going to have the soil moisture regime. It's going to have the order, suborder, and great group in that last word. Okay, so these are central concepts. Here's some examples of intergrade suborders. So for the intergrade suborders, now you can see that the intergrade terms are in this first bit before this capitalized word here. So where are the terms that we look for to actually tell us the soil order? For this first one, the loamy skeletal, oxidic, mesic, ultic, plaxeralf. What soil order is that? And how do you, yeah, Ben, how do you know?
Last 3 letters.
Right, so that alf, in all of these, the last 3 letters always tell you the soil order. But in this case, because it's an intergrade soil, we have ultic instead of the Palexeralf. And that ultic tells us that it's got some properties, even though it is an alpha sol, it's got some properties that grade into ultisols. Okay, so that's an example of an intergrade suborder. And so some of these things are systematic, and some of these things you have to know that there can be a little bit of variation. So that's why it's important to practice and do several of these so you start to get an idea of how to make the interpretation. And then finally we have these aren't all by a long shot, but these just are some examples. These are some extra grade suborders. So in this case, we have a fine loamy mixed mesic cumulic haplodol. And so the soil order for this one is what? What's the soil order for this? The haplodol?
Mollisol, yeah.
Yeah, it's a mollisol, right? Tells you here it's a mollisol. And in this case, the sort of special property that makes this an extra grade suborder is that this has an over thickened A horizon. And so if something's over thickened, you call it cumulic. You know, it's accumulated extra material. Okay. So anybody have any? You need to soak in this stuff a little bit, and ultimately, what I want you to do is take some time to practice, basically pulling apart these series and going from descriptions to series. So your assignment that's now up online is going to be an assignment to get you to basically do three things that are all related. So I've picked 4 soil series. And they're on the assignment's online. It's a Word document, and you'll see there's a table like this. And so there's 4 soil series where I've given you the complete taxonomy of the soil. And what I want you to do is to break it down into like the soil order for this one is an entisol. The suborder is a fluvent suborder. The great group is this Tori is the great group. The subgroup is typic. And then the family is fine loamy mixed superactive calcareous mesic. And so I want you to break those parts down and also say what the info is. What's the information that goes with that? And we're just going to do 4. You got a week to do this, but I think if you go and do this on your own, it will start to the process will start to make sense. You don't. It's ridiculous to memorize any of this stuff besides the soil orders, but you can go through and practice doing this. And then you'll also see this is part 1. Part 2, for each of those same 4 soil orders, I should give you the soil profile, and I just want you to identify the soil profile. And after the page has got the soil profiles, the next page, the next 4 pages actually have the soil profile descriptions. So from those descriptions, you should be able to match the soil profiles to the soil series name. And then I want you to try to match the soil series name to the classification. So for this slide, I've actually said this is the Neshaminy, but you'll see in the presentation, in the assignment, I haven't actually given you the soil name, the soil series name. I've just given you the taxonomy. But you've got the descriptions of the units, you got the soil profile. So there's 4 of them. It'll take a little bit of time, but you've got till next week to finish this. And as always, you can ask me questions if you want to. But this, I think, will give you a chance to hopefully solidify this pretty important part of the whole class, which is learning to understand the classification of soils, at least having exposure to it. You're not going to be experts. But it's good to practice. Okay, and that's it. Any questions about that? So look at the assignment. You can ask me questions to start a lab. We'll get back together at 1:30 briefly to just talk about a couple things, and then we'll get you organized into meeting times with me, and then you've just got the rest of lab time to work on your projects or do whatever is the most stressful thing in your life that you need to take care of. Yeah, so I will see you all at 1:30.
Thank you.